What is up, Mizzou fans? Welcome back to another Show Me Football post-game show. My name is Josh Fan, your host of ShowMeFootball.com, covering Missouri Tigers. Today, I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Brayden Dowers, to talk about the Missouri Tigers rolling over, shutting down the Buffalo Bulls by a final score of 38-0. It was a dominant performance, mostly by the Mizzou defense, and that's pretty much what we're going to start off with today. Brayden is talking about the defense because they're the big bright spot, the big positive in this game. They held Buffalo to 0 points, second straight week that they've held an opponent to 0 points. This obviously was a step up in competition from Murray State. Buffalo still isn't the greatest opponent by any means, but holding two teams 2 weeks in a row to 0 points, I mean, that hasn't been done for Mizzou since like the 60s. It's extremely impressive. I even was arguing with people on Twitter last week after, because we had the number one defense in the country after week one, and people are like, oh, it's Murray State. And it's like, well, okay, you look around the country, everyone else is playing weak teams. They aren't holding their opponent to 0 points. So I don't care who you play. It's still impressive. And we'll talk about this with the offense too. This kind of ties into the offense, not really, or taking care of business against Buffalo, excuse me, fumbling with my words there for a second. We took care of business against Buffalo, and some people are going to have complaints about the offense. We have complaints about the offense, and trust me, we'll get into that in the little time that we have. But we handled our business, and we completely shut down the Buffalo Bulls on defense. Brayden, initial thoughts?
As I was at the game, per usual, I was very impressed by the defense. I think we have the same general consensus opinion on this defense and this offense. There's really no concern in my mind about this defense right now. Again, it's Murray State, it's Buffalo, but this defense looks so incredibly improved, which is not something that I would expect to have said.
They look legit.
When we've lost so much talent on the defensive side of the ball. It's kind of a reverse of last year where the defense was almost like the surefire, it's going to be a top 25 defense this year. Blake Baker, all this returning talent on the defense. And the offense was the big question mark last year versus now this year, the offense is the surefire thing, and the defense was the massive question mark. And we've kind of seen the same thing where the defense was kind of a bit of a letdown last year. The offense is so far, it's been 2 games, but been a little bit of a letdown this year, but it's in a better spot than it was at the beginning of last year. And the defense has really been a significantly really nice surprise, like historically good. Again, it's Murray State, it's Buffalo. There were a few throws that CJ Ogbonna didn't make that I think that Thomas Castellanos, the Boston College quarterback, and SEC caliber quarterbacks are going to make in the future. But for now, the secondary did its job. The linebackers are so incredibly deep. We have so many guys that I trust in the linebacking core that it makes me feel like we have the deepest linebacking room in the country. And our defensive line, we're not blitzing that much, and we're getting to the quarterback with 4 rushers. Our coverages aren't that unique. We're just playing very basic, very safe cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, and it's working. And that's all that we need to do against these teams. I'm really excited to see what Corey Batoon can open up with this defensive playbook whenever we do get to face Boston College next week. Maybe you have to open up the playbook a little bit against Vandy because they look like a significantly improved team as well. And then you have the massive heavy hitters of Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Bama. I'm forgetting a few other. I think, those are really the big 3 games this year. But I'm really excited to see what our defense does in those games with what we've seen from them at this point. Because, again, it's Murray State, it's Buffalo. I know you can't look too much into it. But at the same time, this is the first time that an FBS team has held 2 opponents to shutouts in back-to-back weeks since 2019 with Wisconsin, which is something to take note of for sure.
Yeah, agree with all linebackers. Khalil Jacobs stood out today. Corey Flagg might lead the team in tackles this year. Love this linebacking room. I also liked to see some of the depth defensive line players like Joe Moore and Ja'Kai Lang get in there and produced it. I mean, they line depth, something that, I still, after the Darius Smith injury, it would just be nice to have a guy like him who can close in really fast on the quarterback on some of these third downs. Not that we haven't been closing in, it's just that's kind of your fastball that we had. That was a skill set that we had on this roster that no one else really provides. But I do like how we were able to get plenty of pressure with just four. Again, didn't blitz a lot in this game. I know you already kind of mentioned that. There were a few times in the secondary where some Buffalo players got open, but the quarterback just missed the throw. But again, basic coverages, and I think some of these guys, that are in single coverage now in this or in these first couple of games versus Murray State and Buffalo will have a little bit more help as you face a little bit better talent. And I also thought the refs kind of let the DBs play physical tonight. There were quite a few times where I was kind of waiting it out before I celebrated, thinking, oh, are they going to throw a flag there? And they didn't. They let them play physical, which I liked, but that's not always going to be the case. So you had to tighten up a little bit there. But I said it last week against Murray State, and I'll say it again this week, though. What's so impressive to me is, I mean, Buffalo, they had like one decently long passing play, but besides that, I mean, just really no explosive plays whatsoever from them. And that's something Blake Baker's defense even struggled with, even against the weaker teams, was giving up, an explosive play here or there or busted coverage. We've had none of that. I mean, they look super disciplined, and I'm very impressed by Corey Batoon's defense here through 2 weeks. I mean, they look legit.
Yeah, I mean, they look better than Blake Baker's defense at LSU, who let up 21 points to Nicholls State. So that's something that we can look and hold our heads high over, is the fact that Blake Baker is really kind of struggling at LSU right now. But for real, like this,
He's a fraud. Just say it, Brayden. He's a fraud.
Yeah, he's a fraud. But this defense has looked super, super good. As we are recording this right now, I'm also watching the Oregon and Boise State game. Oregon is punting it back to Boise State. So that's kind of going to segue me into my point about how I think that, like, you look at Mizzou and all the other teams this week. Notre Dame lost, and a bunch of the other top 25 teams struggled with their opponents this week. Mizzou is one of the very few that was playing an FBS team and didn't struggle. There was like Notre Dame lost. Mizzou is 100% going to jump them. Bowling Green, led by former Mizzou legend Connor Bazelak, almost upset Penn State.
Yeah.
I think Mizzou has a really good shot at jumping them in the polls. If Boise State in this next 4 minutes and 33 seconds pulls this off as they have the ball, we're probably going to jump Oregon. Even if they don't close this out, I wouldn't be shocked if we jump Oregon. Bama struggled against USF, even though the score doesn't really look like it. That game was 14-13 in the fourth quarter. So Mizzou has some pretty solid possibilities to jump people in the polls this week, which is something that is kind of scary, because if we're number 5 going into the Boston College matchup, and they're probably going to be a top 20 team with how many other teams lost this week, that's going to be a really big matchup already in the year. And I think that that's a good thing, to have that big matchup at home week 3 before we have to go into Kyle Field and play at Texas A&M, because that's going to be a massive game. But getting into the offensive side of the ball.
Before we talk about the offense, I just want to say, because I forgot to throw it in there, 1 of 12 on third down for Buffalo.
That is massive.
Yeah, and so even Blake Baker's defense last year against the weaker team struggled with the third down defense, at least early on. But go ahead with the offense.
But yeah, getting into the offense, because I don't really have anything else to add about the defense. They were very safe, very basic. We talked about it beforehand, but they ran kind of the same 3 plays the entirety of the second half, very similar passing concepts. It's why Theo Weiss ended up with 13 catches for over 140 yards, because he was just running out routes to the left or right side of the field, and Mookie Cooper was doing the exact same thing. Brady Cook's deep ball is still kind of worrying me. He doesn't have that much zip on the ball, which is worrying me a little bit. just the deep throw accuracy in general has me a little bit worried. The sloppiness of the offensive line and the amount of penalties that we had in this game really kind of worry me as well. The running backs look
Yeah.
solid. I didn't get to see much of the fourth quarter because we left early because it was 31-0 at that point. But the offense, they haven't shown us that much. They've shown us more than they did at the beginning of at this time last year in the Middle Tennessee State game. So I'm keeping that in mind, is that they've looked better than they did at this point last year. But at the same time, when you have this much returning talent and
Yeah.
Brady Cook is looking like this, I'm getting at least a little bit worried. I don't think that Cook's played bad. He had one pretty not great interception today. But I think the offense will be
It was also
just
kind of essentially a punt, though.
yeah.
It was also pretty much a punt because it was fourth down. They're going to turn it over anyway. So it's like, even if it's intercepted there, it's like not the worst thing in the world. He probably doesn't throw that in conference play or against Boston College next week. He probably just makes either a safer throw than what that was, or he just gives up and throws it out, which unfortunately would result in a turnover on downs.
He's looked really good
But
with
it's
his
probably better than
legs.
them getting a turnover with the chance to run it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look,
good with his
there's still some positives from the offense today. First of all, Theo Weiss was fantastic. He had a career high in receptions today. Might even be a career high in yards, though. I'd have to double check.
So.
13 catches for 149 yards. He just looked awesome. There's a few reasons as to why I'm not like panicking or anything yet. One being the fact that we're still technically further ahead than we were at this time last year when it comes to the offense. I mean, we were in a dogfight with MTSU. It looked like Brady Cook didn't know how to play football. Brady Cook doesn't look like he doesn't know how to play football. He just looks like he's very jittery in the pocket. He has a little bit of happy feet and he needs to settle in still, but it's not like terribly bad. Secondly, offensive line penalties. That was also something that was really bad early last year. I think they might still be working out some kinks there because there's way too much talent on this offensive line for them to be this bad. Because I did remember you saying something about that in the group chat. Penalties, though, I noticed that like most of the offenders tonight on those penalties are guys that have been here and were here last year. So I feel like I can kind of give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll get it cleaned up. Also worth noting that Cameron Johnson didn't play tonight because he had a foot injury in practice this week, so it was Mitchell Walters instead of him. And I believe Mitchell Walters was also guilty of an offensive face mask, so hopefully we don't have to see much more Mitchell Walters. Not that he was terrible, but you want to see Cameron Johnson in there. The running backs looked good. I wish we got to see a little bit more of Marcus Carroll. It's kind of weird, though, because they both had the same amount of carries, even though it feels like Nate Noel was out there way more. But I want to see more Marcus Carroll. I just thought he was also very efficient in his carries, and I feel like once he gets a full head of steam, he can be very dangerous, just as dangerous as Noel. But back to kind of what I was saying, I'm not panicking or anything necessarily yet. I also think they closed the playbook pretty much in the second half. I mean, you could tell they were just running the same 3 plays over and over again. And that's just kind of how it was last year. Like, I think they deserve the benefit of the doubt for right now. Hopefully they get it together by Boston College next week, though, and Brady starts hitting some of these throws. I have to cut Brady some slack, though. He did have one really nice throw where he threaded the needle to Theo Weiss, and Theo just dropped it. Like, he needs to catch that. It was tight, and he would have taken a hit, but he needs to catch that. There was also another deep one to Marquise Johnson, which was underthrown. It was, like an underthrown pass interference call that gave Mizzou a first down. And I don't know if that was intentional or not from Brady to underthrow that and get the flag. Because there's a good chance with it being Marquise Johnson, just because he's fast as hell, the DB probably is going to grab him. But the thing is I would like to see that be connected on, just because Brady's been struggling with the deep ball and you want to get that rhythm going. There was a lot of times tonight where I didn't see much zip on the passes. There were some times where we lost out on some yards. Like, there was a play to Josh Manning I noticed where he caught the ball, but he would have had way more room to run if not for the fact that Josh Manning had to get on his knees to catch the pass. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add about the game tonight. I'm sure we'll talk way more about Boston College later in the week. I'm super
Yeah.
tired because it's a long drive from Columbia back to Kansas City. So Mizzou got a really good win. I think that we'll be pretty high in the polls. I don't have too much more left to add.
I did have one last note about Blake Craig, the kicker. So he made a 51 yarder, but he missed another 50 yarder and then a 49
Mhm.
yarder, I think it was. Here's what I'll say about that, though. Obviously, it was always going to be tough to replace Harrison Mevis, but the leg is there. Like he had a couple field goals tonight that would have been good from 60. It's just the accuracy part that he has to get together. He's still extremely young. This is his first year kicking. He also looks pretty damn good on point after attempts and on the chip shots. And as long as he's hitting those, I can live with a few misses from 50, 60 yards out. But I mean, he has a big leg, clearly. I don't know if you have anything else to say to that.
No, I remember whenever it was the opening drive of the game, he hit that like 52-yard field goal, and that made me pretty confident that he was going to. Sorry, that made me pretty confident. Like whenever you lose Harrison Mevis, to know
You're
that
good.
we have a kicker that's capable of making a kick from 50 yards is a pretty good sign, for sure.
Yeah. And then one last note I'll add, and you don't even have to say anything to this. This is just kind of my last thoughts on the offense because I forgot to say this and it was in my notes. Should also be taken into account the fact that there was a point in this game where Luther Burden and Theo Weiss were both out of the game for an extended period of time. Luther Burden basically didn't play the entire second half. And that meant you had no Brett Norfleet, no Theo Weiss, and no Luther Burden for a considerable portion of the game, which, you know, your offense is going to struggle when your top three pass catching options are out. But Mizzou handled business. They beat Buffalo 38-0. We're on to Boston College. That's when the test really starts. It's a game that looks tougher than originally looked at the beginning of the year when you looked at the schedule, but we'll be previewing that next week. But yeah, this is a
Yep.
quick one, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com for more. Brayden stuff will be in the description. Show Me Movies. Go check it out. But we are signing off. MIZ.
ZOU.